As of 2016, Nick had gone to rehab 18 times. And that means that in 7 years, he went to rehab 18 times.
Rob Reiner's inner circle has finally spoken about why his son reached a breaking point. But before that truth lands, you need to understand the world that shaped one of Hollywood's most intense legends. Robert De Niro was born Robert Anthony De Niro on August 17, 1943, in Manhattan, New York City. Art wasn't something he discovered later. It surrounded him from the start. His parents, Virginia Admiral and Robert De Niro Sr., weren't hobbyists or weekend creatives. They were serious painters, deeply embedded in New York's art scene.
So when you think about a family here who was trying everything over the course of a decade plus, I mean, you're putting a lot of effort into dealing with this relationship, and for it to end so tragically and violently is very upsetting.
De Niro grew up watching discipline, obsession, sacrifice, and emotional struggle play out daily, not just on canvas, but in real life. Even after his parents split while he was young, the atmosphere never softened. The home stayed bohemian, intellectually sharp, and emotionally demanding.
That's an extraordinary financial expense. It may make life easier in some ways, but it doesn't necessarily make life better.
That environment shaped his worldview early. It trained his eye to notice tension, silence, and inner conflict long before he ever stepped on a set. Growing up in Manhattan's Little Italy sharpened that edge even more. De Niro absorbed the raw street rhythm, the body language, side glances, and coded conversations that couldn't be faked. Years later, those same mannerisms exploded on screen with frightening authenticity. By his teenage years, De Niro wasn't experimenting. He was locked in. Acting wasn't a phase, it was the mission. He enrolled in elite acting programs across New York and treated training like survival, not curiosity. He studied under Stella Adler, who drilled emotional truth and psychological depth into her students. This wasn't about memorizing lines, it was about understanding why a character breathes the way they do. Later, he trained with Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio, where method acting became a full-contact mental discipline. Those years created the De Niro formula the world would come to fear and admire. Total immersion, extreme preparation, zero shortcuts. If he played it, he lived it. Period. His early film roles in the late 60s and early 70s were small, but the warning signs were already there. The intensity simmered just beneath the surface. Directors noticed. Hollywood took notes. Then came the partnership that rewired cinema itself. When De Niro teamed up with Martin Scorsese for Mean Streets in 1973, everything changed. The film was gritty, semi-autobiographical, and dangerously real. De Niro's performance didn't feel acted. It felt volatile, unpredictable, alive. That role announced a new kind of actor, one who could channel real human instability without polishing the edges. His rise accelerated with The Godfather Part II in 1974. Playing young Vito Corleone was a massive risk. De Niro barely spoke English on screen, relying on silence, posture, and micro-expressions. The result was surgical, controlled, and powerful. That performance earned him his first Academy Award and confirmed he wasn't just talented. He was dangerous in the best way. But what truly separated De Niro from everyone else was his obsession with authenticity. De Niro didn't pretend to become characters. He dissolved into them. For Taxi Driver in 1976, he didn't research from a distance. He got a real taxi license and drove New York streets for months. The loneliness, the anger, the quiet madness, it all soaked in. That infamous "you talking to me" moment wasn't scripted. It was raw instinct caught on film. It became a cultural scar. By the time Raging Bull arrived in 1980, his dedication had reached near-myth status. To play Jake LaMotta, De Niro trained as a real boxer, then gained over 60 pounds to show the character's collapse. The transformation was brutal. physical, emotional, uncomfortable, and unforgettable. That role earned him his second Academy Award and locked his legacy as an actor willing to sacrifice everything for truth. Throughout the 80s and 90s, De Niro stacked classic after classic. The king of comedy, Once Upon a Time in America, Brazil, Goodfellas, Cape Fear, Casino, each role revealing a new layer. In Goodfellas, his Jimmy Conway wasn't loud. He was quiet and calculating, proof that real danger doesn't need to shout. Then came the twist no one expected. In the late 90s and early 2000s, De Niro leaned into comedy and crushed that too. Films like Analyze This, Meet the Parents, and The Intern flipped everything audiences thought they knew about him. Instead of menace and silence, they saw timing, self-awareness, and sharp humor. It proved something simple. Only an actor with real authority can mock his own legend and remain untouchable. These roles weren't accidents or cash grabs. They were confidence at the highest level. De Niro knew exactly who he was on screen and wasn't afraid to poke fun at that image. That kind of move only works when your resume is bulletproof. But De Niro's impact didn't stop when the cameras cut. Outside of acting, he became a serious force as a producer, director, and cultural power player. After the September 11th attacks, he co-founded the Tribeca Film Festival to help revive Lower Manhattan. This wasn't branding, it was commitment. Tribeca became a lifeline for the neighborhood and a launchpad for independent filmmakers. Through it, De Niro backed new voices, risky ideas, and fresh stories, making sure cinema didn't turn safe or stale. As a director, his style stayed personal and grounded. A Bronx Tale in 1993 wasn't flashy, it was honest. Drawn from his own upbringing, it explored loyalty, temptation, and the quiet choices that change lives forever. He wasn't chasing spectacle, he was chasing truth. Even as the years stacked up, De Niro never faded into the background. Performances in Silver Linings, Playbook, The Irishman, and Killers of the Flower Moon showed an artist willing to face aging, regret, and history head-on. The Irishman hit especially hard. Using digital de-aging, De Niro returned to the criminal world that defined his early career. But this time, there was no swagger, only reflection, loss, and the heavy cost of moral shortcuts. Off-screen, De Niro's personal life unfolded in chapters just as layered as his films, marked by reinvention, responsibility, and deep loyalty to family. In 1976, he married actress and singer Diane Abbott during the most explosive rise of his career. Fame was accelerating, pressure was constant, and the spotlight never shut off. During that time, they welcomed their son, Rafael De Niro. Unlike his father, Rafael chose real estate over acting, carving his own lane while staying loosely connected to the film world. De Niro's sense of family ran even deeper. When he adopted Abbott's daughter, Drina De Niro, the decision wasn't symbolic, it was permanent. It showed his willingness to step up beyond biology. Drina later explored acting, modeling, and filmmaking, often crediting De Niro as a steady presence and protector in her life. That bond held even when the marriage didn't. In 1988, De Niro and Abbott separated, closing one chapter without abandoning responsibility. He stayed involved, supportive, and present for his children despite the split. By the mid-1990s, his personal life shifted again through his relationship with actress and model Toukie Smith. In 1995, they welcomed twin sons, Julian and Aaron De Niro, via surrogacy. The twins marked a new phase of fatherhood later in life. De Niro stayed fiercely private about their upbringing, determined to keep them grounded despite his global fame. In 1997, he married Grace Hightower, a philanthropist and former flight attendant. Their relationship was built on shared values, ambition, and family focus. In 1998, they welcomed their son, Elliot De Niro. De Niro later spoke publicly about Elliot's autism, using his platform to push awareness and understanding forward. Although he and Hightower separated later that same year, their story didn't end there. In a rare move, they reconciled and renewed their vows in 2004. That choice reflected something deeply personal about De Niro, a belief in second chances, emotional endurance, and rebuilding after fractures. Their family grew again in 2011 with the birth of their daughter, Helen Grace De Niro, born via surrogate. Becoming a father again in his late 60s didn't slow him down, it sharpened him. He embraced the role with the same seriousness that defined every chapter of his parenting journey. De Niro has often said fatherhood kept reshaping him, bringing perspective, forcing humility, and giving him purpose far beyond awards or on-screen legacy. Taken together, these chapters paint a portrait of a man whose private life was just as layered as his public image. Through marriages, separations, reconciliations, and decades of raising children, De Niro consistently showed that family, however complex, remained at his core. Then came the silence that shook Hollywood. After the horrific discovery at Rob Reiner's Brentwood home, shock spread far beyond Los Angeles. Friends and longtime collaborators struggled to reconcile the gentle, affable man they knew with the brutal reality now tied to his name. Among those most deeply affected was Robert De Niro, a close friend of Reiner's for decades. When he finally spoke, he did so with rare emotional openness, hinting at what he believed had been quietly unraveling behind closed doors. "This didn't come out of nowhere," De Niro said softly, his voice heavy with restraint. "When something like this happens, people want a single moment, a single trigger. That's not how these things work," De Niro said. "They build, they fracture, they erode." The events of December 14th, 2025, shattered a family and stunned the industry. For those who had sensed long-simmering strain, nothing about it felt sudden. When Roy Reiner arrived at the Brentwood home after learning her parents had missed a routine massage appointment, she expected confusion, not catastrophe. What she encountered instead would haunt her for life. She discovered her father's body and fled the house in terror, later learning of her mother's fate. In a single moment, Roy became an unwilling witness to the consequences of years of unresolved tension. De Niro spoke quietly about the weight of such a discovery. "That's something no child should ever have to see," he said. "That image doesn't leave you, it becomes part of you." As investigators pieced together the timeline, attention turned to Nick Reiner, who had been living with his parents. Friends later recalled that Nick had grown increasingly volatile in the months leading up to the tragedy. De Niro was careful not to excuse what followed, but he spoke honestly about what he believed had been ignored for too long. "There was pain," he said. "Deep pain. And pain that's dismissed doesn't disappear. It turns inward or outward." One moment that later haunted those involved was a Christmas party hosted by Conan O'Brien the night before the killings. Witnesses described Nick as agitated and visibly unsteady when Rob confronted him about his behavior. The argument was loud and tense enough to unsettle the room, including De Niro, who watched with rising concern. "That wasn't discipline," De Niro said plainly. "That was years of bottled frustration colliding in public. And once pressure like that erupts, there's no sealing it back up." After Roy contacted authorities, her next call spoke volumes about how close Reiner's inner circle truly was. She called Billy Crystal, and his response was immediate. He rushed to the house with his wife. No hesitation. That urgency said everything. Reiner wasn't just respected, he was deeply loved. De Niro later described Crystal's reaction as pure heartbreak. "We all felt like we failed him somehow," he admitted. "You look back and ask what signs we explained away, because it was easier than confronting them." Nick's arrest later that day marked the legal beginning of a tragedy that had been building emotionally for years. De Niro refused to sensationalize the violence or turn it into spectacle. "This isn't a story about fame or Hollywood," he said. "It's about a family. It's about mental health. It's about what happens when love and fear exist in the same space for too long." In the days that followed, De Niro urged compassion, but not denial. Understanding, not excuses. "You can mourn the victims and still ask how things got this far," he said. "If we don't ask that question," De Niro said, "then we're just waiting for the next time it happens." For him, losing Rob Reiner wasn't just losing a friend. It was a brutal reminder that even lives filled with laughter, success, and connection can hide unbearable strain. "We tell ourselves strong people will ask for help," he said quietly. "Sometimes they don't, and sometimes, by the time they do, it's already too late." Now that you know the full story, what part of this tragedy stayed with you the most? Do you think the warning signs were there all along, or was this truly unavoidable? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know what you think. If this story moved you, pass it on to someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more untold stories, and we'll see you next time.